Urgent! Putin is gone. The bunker is empty. Almost 200 days of silence. The truth is finally out. This is unprecedented. Magyary finishes the occupiers in Donetsk. Night changed everything, starting the liberation of Ukraine. Melitopol and Berdiansk are free. Shocking details. Everyone is talking about it. American troops are already at the border with Ukraine. Trump and Novrotsky shook hands. An agreement that changes the course of events. Meanwhile, Ukrainian weaponry leads again. The killer drone is airborne, spreading panic in Russia, prompting urgent reports. Everything is lost. And all of this happened just now. Greetings, I am Irina Taslanova, and we are getting started. Urgent, Putin is gone. A record-breaking isolation of the bunker leader has begun. The Kremlin is nervously silent, trips have been cancelled, and Putin is appearing outside his residences less frequently.
After his trip to China, Vladimir Putin did not visit a single Russian region, as he did last year. This has further extended the pause in his travels around the country, which has already reached a record 196 days. There haven't been such long breaks even during the pandemic.
The last time Putin appeared in a Russian region was back on November 6, 2025. At that time, he visited Samara for 1 day, and that was his only trip outside the area where his main residences are located. Moreover, there has also been a pause in his foreign trips. Before the visit to China, his last trip outside Russia was back in December, a short tour to Turkmenistan. In fact, the Kremlin has effectively shut its dictator off from the world for almost half a year. Could this be a new level of isolation and fear?
One of the most significant and longest stretches of time without any international trips occurred specifically during the months leading up to the invasion of Ukraine. After his official visit to India in early December 2021, Putin did not venture outside of the specific regions where his residences are located for a total of 60 days.
It seems that the level of anxiety in the Kremlin has now reached a record high. Since the beginning of 26th year, most public events involving Putin have taken place in the Kremlin, Novo-Ogaryovo, or within Moscow and St. Petersburg. Journalists are increasingly suggesting that Putin's prolonged bunkerization may be directly linked to fears for his own safety. It seems the dictator is so afraid of risks that he is increasingly reluctant to leave his secure residences. Urgent! Magyary hit Donetsk again. Ukrainian drones forced occupiers out. Devastating footage is out now.
In the comments, locals are writing about some kind of hell in the Kievsky district, which is in the city center, and that there were also explosions and it was intense in the Voroshilovsky district. The explosion was so strong the whole building shook. This is fucked up. What's happening? These are also quotes from the comments.
Destruction details are scarce, but hits are confirmed in the city center. Obviously, our forces launched a special operation to liberate Ukrainian territories. Melitopol has been awake since last night. The occupiers tried to escape, but it was already too late.
The energy infrastructure and the railway junction were attacked. After the attack, electrical power was cut off in the majority of districts of the occupied region.
The bombing hit parade continues with Ukrainian Berdiansk. Reports show explosions in the port area. Crucially, these aren't isolated incidents. The Magyar birds started their epic cleansing of our territories, and it's accelerating. More to come. Incredible. While the Kremlin threatens the West, a steel shield is rising on Russia's borders. Trump is sending 5,000 more American troops to Poland, signaling a clear warning to Moscow.
In light of the recent election of Kuril Islands as the president of Poland, a candidate whom I have very proudly supported, and taking into account our close relationship with him, I am pleased to announce today that the United States will deploy an additional 5,000 military personnel to Poland.
Now, it's not just loud words, but decisive actions. The US is moving its military fist closer to Europe's eastern flank, and Poland is effectively implementing a NATO fortress regime. In Warsaw, they have signaled readiness to receive more American troops and further strengthen the alliance border. And these are not just loud statements. The Poles are already investing nearly 5% of their economy into their military, preparing for scenarios that were once only whispered about. It seems Europe is no longer waiting for things to simply blow over. The West is beginning to build a new line of strength, tough, armed, and as ready as possible for any turn of events. It has happened. The Ukrainian equivalent of Shaheds is going on the hunt. Total shock and awe in the Kremlin. The Ukrainian armed forces have deployed an absolute weapon of retribution. For the first time, Ukrainian military publicly demonstrated their new ultra-powerful strike drone killer, the Behemoth, which experts are already loudly calling a devastating domestic counterpart to the Iranian UAVs. This flying monster was specifically designed for total incineration and destruction of strategic targets at colossal distances. According to the released data, this drone has a lethal range of up to 300 kilometers and is equipped with a warhead weighing 75 kilograms. The main feature is a unique tandem charge, a powerful shaped charge core combined with a thermobaric warhead that incinerates all living things to ashes. It is also reported that the Behemoth is capable of flying at critically low altitudes, literally hugging the ground, which completely nullifies the much-vaunted radars and makes it absolutely invisible to Russian air defenses. The drone can operate aggressively both in FPV mode under strict operator control and fully autonomously, and for invulnerability, it uses the Starlink system. But even this is not the worst nightmare for Moscow. In addition to the basic model, there is already a Behemoth deep strike version created exclusively to deliver catastrophic strikes at maximum depth. This super drone is capable of autonomously carrying out the most complex tasks over enormous distances, which makes it a powerful tool of destruction in modern warfare. Ukrainian developers are now emphasizing that this is an entirely and completely reimagined revolutionary approach to unmanned technology that can fundamentally alter and change the rules of the game on the front line. Urgent! NATO openly speaks about Ukraine's victory. The Kremlin is trapped by its own illusions. The Secretary General of the Alliance, Mark Rutte, firmly states Russia is not achieving its objectives on the battlefield. Ukrainian cities use new air defense systems. Drones. Long-range ammunition is in action. The United States is in a diplomatic game. Rutte is using a subtle strategy with Trump. A complex balance of rhetoric and strategic interests. Personal diplomacy saves Ukraine. The first shocking details follow. NATO now speaks quite openly about Ukraine's victory, and is even creating advantages for Kyiv with its own hands. After another meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in the Ramstein format, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte made a clear statement. The Kremlin is not achieving its objectives on the battlefield. Speaking at a press conference in Berlin, he emphasized that Russian troops are currently facing some very serious difficulties. Despite constant pressure and attempts at offensives, the occupying army is not demonstrating any strategic successes. However, according to Rutte, the Allies must continue to strengthen their support for Ukraine, since the war is ongoing and leaves no room for pauses. We cannot lose sight of Ukraine, the NATO Secretary General emphasized. After all, the world is simultaneously facing a number of other security challenges, but Russian aggression remains one of the key threats to European stability. He specifically stressed that Russia continues its massive attacks, striking Ukrainian cities and infrastructure virtually around the clock, day and night. That is why the issue of supporting Ukraine remains at the forefront of the international agenda. During the meeting in the Ramstein format, the Allies reaffirmed their financial commitments. In 2025, Ukraine has been promised about $60 billion in military aid. It is not only about the amount, but also the quality of support. Among the main priorities is strengthening air defense systems that allow Ukrainian cities to be protected from missile and drone attacks. Also in the spotlight is the development of unmanned technologies, which are playing an increasingly important role on the modern battlefield. Special emphasis is placed on the supply of long-range munitions, which allow Ukrainian forces to strike targets behind enemy lines and weaken its military potential. NATO emphasizes that supporting Ukraine is not only a matter of solidarity, but also an investment in the security of all of Europe. And as long as the war continues, the Allies are determined to maintain unity and continue providing assistance for as long as it takes. However, behind the scenes of diplomacy, the situation is much more complicated. According to Politico, citing insiders, Mark Rutte is forced to play a delicate political game in his relations with US President Trump. This is not just about diplomacy, but about preserving crucial US support for Ukraine. According to sources, the NATO Secretary General deliberately uses soft rhetoric and even public compliments toward the American leader. And he does this with one goal: to prevent the curtailment of military aid to Ukraine. Within the alliance, such steps have provoked a mixed reaction. Earlier, Western media reported that some allies were dissatisfied with Rutte's overly approving statements regarding Trump's decisions. However, as insiders explain, this strategy is carefully calculated. NATO's ability to help Ukraine is directly dependent on Washington's position, Moscow, and therefore on how effectively the Secretary General manages to find a solid common ground with Donald Trump.
If this means that the US will continue to provide advanced weaponry and exchange intelligence, then such a tactic is fully justified.
In fact, this is about a delicate balance between political rhetoric and strategic interests. According to sources, Mark Rutte himself believes that even public flattery is a small price to pay if it helps maintain support for Ukraine in the war. After all, the key objective remains unchanged: to create the conditions for Ukraine's victory and to deter further Russian aggression. And the main logic, as sources explain, citing Politico,
The primary focus remains centered on what is best for the nation of Ukraine. If that means the United States will continue to sell weaponry to Ukraine and share vital intelligence, then he is undoubtedly making the correct decisions.
diplomacy on the edge of psychology. Thus, Rutte's key objective isn't confrontation, but securing continued US support for Ukraine through personal contact with Trump. Insiders call this pragmatic, less pressure and more direct dialogue to maintain Ukraine's access to weapons and intelligence. Ukraine is central to this strategy. The article emphasizes that for the NATO Secretary General, the main thing is precisely the result for Ukraine.
This helps to relieve some of the pressure. And if it means continued support for Ukraine, it is clearly the right decision.
Who is actually winning in this game? Meanwhile, Western politicians debate a broader context: US involvement and European unity, and the stability of arms supplies to Ukraine. And against this backdrop, another important emphasis emerges. Public support for Ukraine in the US and Europe remains significant despite political disagreements. What does this actually mean? In fact, we are talking about a complex diplomatic system. NATO is trying to maintain unity using personal channels of influence, and the main goal is not to lose support for Ukraine. And the main question, can personal diplomacy become the key factor in determining the fate of military aid to Ukraine? It seems the answer is being shaped right now behind the scenes in NATO and Washington. Let us recall that all of this happened after a scandalous meeting. Trump lashed out at NATO. Loud accusations and hints of revenge. US President Donald Trump sharply criticized NATO allies during a closed-door meeting. His interlocutor was Secretary General Mark Rutte, and what was supposed to be routine negotiations turned into a real political explosion. According to sources, the atmosphere was extremely tense.
It went off the rails. The conversation was nothing but a tirade of insults.
Moreover, according to insiders, Trump apparently threatened to do whatever it takes. The main grievance is Iran. The reason for his outrage is the lack of US support from Europe in the conflict surrounding Iran. Trump made it clear that the allies had not lived up to expectations and that this could have consequences. Sources say he is weighing reprisals, wants concrete actions from partners, and wants the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. However, a White House spokesperson said the president made no demands to the alliance during his talk with Rutte. A public outburst followed the meeting. On social media, Trump did not hold back.
NATO was not there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland? That huge, poorly managed chunk of ice. None of these people understood anything until they were put under pressure.
But NATO responds. Alliance spokesperson Alison Hart strongly disagrees with the negative assessments. She stated, "The meeting was very frank and at the same time constructive. But can a conversation that includes threats really be called constructive? The Japanese dragon has awakened, the era of silence is over. What Putin feared so much has come to pass. Asia's quiet giant has shed its pacifism and is striking the aggressor. Tokyo joins Ukraine's side. This isn't just aid, it's a total shift in geopolitics." While Moscow hoped for Eastern neutrality, the samurai draw their blades. Details follow, silence ends. The Japanese dragon has awakened. Long Japan was a quiet global giant. A powerful economy, enormous wealth, but a complete refusal to play a military role due to its pacifist constitution. But Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 shattered this comfortable world. Tokyo realized if the rabid beast isn't finished off in Europe, tomorrow the flames will engulf Asia. Today, we are witnessing a fatal turn for the Kremlin. Japan is entering the game as a steel partner of Ukraine, understanding that Kyiv and Tokyo are fighting the same battle for survival. Numbers speak louder than words. Japan has already invested more than $15 billion in Ukraine, ranking 6th in the world among donors. But the real shock for the Kremlin is the new package for 2026 amounting to $6 billion. This was stated by the Deputy Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, Olena Kondratyuk. Kyiv has already received from Tokyo more than 2,500 electric generators, over 65 transformers, 10 generator installations, as well as other critically important equipment to support the restoration of the energy system. $6 billion is almost 40% of all the aid provided in previous years, given at once. Tokyo is no longer merely supporting the Ukrainian economy to survive, but is actively investing in the future of systemic security by purchasing radars, demining vehicles, and advanced high-tech equipment. That puts our army ahead above the occupiers. But the main revolution is happening in the laws. Until recently, Japan prohibited the supply of tanks, artillery, missiles, ships, and aircraft, the so-called 5 categories. But already in the first half of 2026, these shackles will be cast off. In February of this year, NATO representatives stated that Japan plans to join Pearl, an initiative to support Ukraine. This paves the way for systematic deliveries of dual-use equipment, from secure communication systems and cyber defense to powerful radar complexes capable of blinding the enemy for hundreds of kilometers.
Going beyond the supply of specific materials, it is worth considering the broader dimension of Japanese involvement, the transfer of technology, know-how, and institutional practices. Japan has accumulated unique expertise in a number of industries that are directly relevant to Ukraine's needs.
This paves the way for systematic deliveries of dual-use equipment, from secure communication systems and cyber defense to powerful radar complexes capable of blinding the enemy for hundreds of kilometers. But this is not a one-way street. Tokyo is vitally interested in the unique combat experience that Ukraine gains every day by using the latest systems in real wartime conditions. This technological alliance transforms support from humanitarian aid into a true partnership. But there is a catch, in fact, a thorn in Tokyo's side. That thorn is Moscow. Tokyo is stepping up to the front line. The country has openly declared the threat posed by the Russian Federation. The Minister of Defense has dealt a crushing blow to diplomacy. The war in Ukraine is a direct attack on Japan's security. The reason has come to light. North Korea is sending its soldiers to the Russian front to gain hellish combat experience and technology.
The war in Ukraine is not somewhere far away. There, North Korean soldiers are learning new ways of fighting with drones, artificial intelligence in cyberspace, and conventional weapons. When they return to North Korea, the question arises, what exactly will this experience be used for, and against whom?
The minister is furious. It is vital for Japan to uncover the hidden motives of Kim Jong-un and Putin, because this military alliance is turning East Asia into a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. But revenge against Russia has already been prepared. The Kremlin is trapped by soft power. The Japanese government is launching a plan for the quiet annexation of the Kuril Islands through the economy. Tokyo has proposed to Moscow a detailed plan for seizing the initiative on the islands, from full control over the environment to remote medicine from Hokkaido. It is assumed that Japanese doctors could consult both patients and local Russian doctors, including via the internet. According to Tokyo, Russian and Japanese private companies could organize sea cruises for Japanese tourists to some of the southern Kuril Islands. Japanese authorities also expect that environmentalists from both countries could work together to preserve the environment. It seems that Russia is losing its exclusive rights to the islands under the guise of cooperation. But that's not all. In the fishing industry, Japan is preparing a bait for Moscow that's impossible to refuse. Joint fish processing and a lightning-fast takeover of the seafood market. Tokyo is essentially taking the island's resources for itself. And here, Moscow should be on alert because all these moves towards the Kurils by Tokyo are clearly not without reason. Japan has officially confirmed the Kuril Islands are occupied territory that the USSR illegally stole. Russia considers the disputed islands part of the Sakhalin region, while the Japanese authorities include them in the Nemuro district of Hokkaido Prefecture. Once again, the Secretary General of the Japanese government has stated that Japan's sovereignty extends to these islands.
The Northern Territories are islands over which our country exercises sovereignty, the original territory of our country. There have been no changes in the position of the Japanese government. The subject of negotiations on a peace treaty is the territorial status of the 4 islands. This is the consistent position of our country.
Moscow is shaking with fear. Nikolai Patrushev has gone into a real hysteria. Putin's aide sees Tokyo's actions as preparations for a full-scale return of the territories by force. He is shouting about new territorial claims that will finish off Russia. According to Patrushev, Tokyo is allegedly driven by greed. Supposedly, the Japanese want the vast riches of Russia's mineral resources and the biological resources of the Kurils. Fear makes things look bigger than they are.
Japan is actively laying the groundwork to put forward new territorial claims, specifically in the waters washing Russia's shores, which directly and significantly impacts Russia's national security interests.
He added that there is nothing to discuss. The islands, he says, are ours. But at the same time, he admitted, Japan has created a powerful fleet and, together with NATO, is preparing for revenge. Pacifism has been thrown onto the scrap heap. Tokyo is shifting to an aggressive policy of retaliation. Patrushev revealed a terrible secret. NATO is planning to use the Japanese fleet as a battering ram to destroy its enemies around the world. Legislative bans on war are about to be lifted. The samurai are going on the hunt. Japan has officially chosen a side, and that side is Ukraine. Moscow's blackmail over the Kurils and North Korea's nuclear threats have only steeled Tokyo's resolve. Samurai composure has given way to decisive action. With a record military budget and a new defense industry strategy, Japan is becoming a steel shield in the East, giving Russia and its allies no chance for revenge. The Kremlin wanted to isolate Ukraine, but in the end, it got a powerful adversary in the form of a revived Great Japan. With that, we conclude our episode. We continue to closely follow the most relevant events so we can be the first to tell you about them. Don't forget to subscribe. See you!